Some doors stay closed for 1,000 years because the world is not ready for the truth behind them. Every child in the Moon Kingdom grew up hearing stories about the last guardian, yet no one believed he had ever been real. The elders called him a comforting legend. The nobles dismissed him as an invention created to inspire loyalty, and travelers laughed whenever they heard that somewhere beyond the Silver Forest stood a forgotten temple waiting for its rightful protector to return. Over generations, the kingdom slowly forgot the meaning of hope. Ancient statues weathered beneath endless seasons, moonlit shrines crumbled into silence, and sacred symbols faded from palace walls until they became little more than decorative carvings with no remembered purpose. Only Emily Carter, a quiet Omega servant assigned to the royal archives, still found herself drawn toward those forgotten stories. Every morning before sunrise, she carefully dusted fragile scrolls, repaired cracked bindings, and arranged centuries-old manuscripts that almost no one bothered to read anymore. While other servants hurried through their work hoping to earn praise from the palace stewards, Emily lingered over faded illustrations of celestial wolves, forgotten kings, and mysterious guardians whose names had vanished from history. She often wondered why every surviving record ended the same way, with missing pages or sentences abruptly cut short, as though someone had deliberately erased the final chapter. On the evening of the Harvest Moon Festival, the palace overflowed with music, laughter, and brilliant silver lanterns hanging above marble courtyards. Noble families celebrated another prosperous season, while King Alpha Ethan Walker welcomed ambassadors from distant territories with the calm confidence expected of a ruler. Although admired for his wisdom and steady leadership, Ethan privately carried a growing concern. Strange reports had begun arriving from every corner of the kingdom. Ancient monuments reflected moonlight even on cloudy nights. Long-abandoned watchtowers emitted faint silver glows before dawn. Hunters claimed they heard distant bells echoing through forests where no villages remained. None of it made sense, yet every report pointed toward the same forgotten region hidden beyond the western mountains. Emily knew nothing about those secret meetings. She spent the festival alone inside the royal archives, grateful for the rare silence after the librarians had joined the celebration. As she returned an old volume to the highest shelf, a brittle parchment slipped free and drifted onto the stone floor. Unlike every manuscript she had handled before, this page showed no title and no author's name. At its center rested a perfectly drawn crescent moon surrounding a single unfamiliar symbol. The moment Emily's fingertips touched the faded ink, the symbol shimmered with soft silver light before fading almost instantly. She stepped backward, convinced exhaustion had played tricks on her eyes. But then another strange sound filled the room. Somewhere beyond the archive walls, deep beneath the palace itself, a slow ancient bell rang only once. The vibration passed through the stone beneath her feet like the heartbeat of something impossibly old awakening from a forgotten sleep. Outside, the joyful celebration continued completely unaware. While high above the kingdom the full moon emerged from behind drifting clouds brighter than anyone could remember, casting its silver light toward a distant forest where weathered stone statues silently began turning their faces in the same direction for the first time in 1,000 years. Emily Carter barely slept after hearing the mysterious bell beneath the palace. Long after the Harvest Moon Festival ended and every corridor fell silent, the memory of that deep vibration lingered in her mind like an unanswered question. By sunrise, she convinced herself it had simply been an old pipe shifting beneath the ancient foundations. Yet the strange parchment remained exactly where she had hidden it inside her satchel. As she unfolded it once again beneath the soft morning light filtering through the archive windows, the unfamiliar crescent symbol shimmered faintly before disappearing as if it recognized her presence. The parchment contained no words, only an intricate map formed by delicate silver lines that seemed incomplete until another ray of sunlight touched its surface. Slowly, hidden pathways appeared across the page, stretching beyond the western mountains toward a region erased from every official map stored inside the royal archives. Emily's heartbeat quickened. She had organized thousands of historical records, yet she had never seen this location mentioned anywhere. At the same time, King Alpha Ethan Walker gathered his most trusted advisors inside the royal council chamber. Reports continued arriving from villages scattered throughout the Moon Kingdom. Shepherds described ancient stone wolves facing west overnight. Travelers claimed abandoned shrines glowed beneath the full moon before returning to darkness by dawn. Even experienced scouts admitted that compasses behaved strangely near the western forests, refusing to point north. Most council members dismissed the stories as superstition meant to frighten common people, but Ethan noticed that every witness described nearly identical events despite living hundreds of miles apart. Rather than ignore the reports, he quietly ordered a discreet investigation before fear spread throughout the kingdom. Meanwhile, Emily could not resist comparing the mysterious parchment with every surviving atlas inside the archives. Hidden behind shelves filled with forgotten manuscripts, she discovered tiny inconsistencies that no one else had noticed. Pages describing the western frontier had been carefully removed from multiple books written centuries apart, leaving perfectly clean cuts instead of natural damage. It was as though generations of scholars had deliberately erased the same destination from history. As afternoon approached, a gentle breeze entered through an open window, scattering loose papers across the stone floor. The mysterious parchment floated away from Emily's hands before settling beside an enormous mural carved into the archive wall. For years she had walked past that carving without paying attention, believing it portrayed nothing more than decorative moon phases. Yet the silver symbol on the parchment aligned perfectly with one section of the mural, causing several carved lines to glow softly beneath her fingertips. Hidden within the stone appeared another message that no ordinary light could reveal. It contained only a single sentence: "When the moon remembers, the path returns." Emily stepped back in astonishment, unable to understand how an inscription could remain invisible for so many generations. At that exact moment, far beyond the palace walls, Ethan reached the highest balcony overlooking the western mountains. Above the distant forest, a narrow pillar of pale silver light rose silently into the sky before fading within seconds. No thunder followed. No clouds gathered. Only silence remained. Ethan realized this was no coincidence. Somewhere beyond those forgotten woods, something ancient had begun to awaken, and without knowing why, both the King Alpha and the quiet Omega servant had taken their first steps toward the same long-hidden destiny. The silver pillar of light vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, yet neither Emily Carter nor King Alpha Ethan Walker could dismiss what they had witnessed. Throughout the following day, an uneasy stillness settled over the Moon Kingdom. Birds avoided the western skies, merchants quietly changed their travel routes, and even the palace guards spoke in hushed voices whenever the distant mountains came into view. Emily tried to return to her ordinary routine inside the royal archives, carefully restoring fragile manuscripts and arranging forgotten records, but the mysterious parchment refused to leave her thoughts. Every few minutes the crescent symbol shimmered faintly, growing brighter whenever she faced the western windows. Unable to ignore the strange connection any longer, she searched the oldest sections of the archive where dust-covered shelves had not been touched in decades. Behind a row of cracked stone tablets, she discovered an enormous astronomical chart unlike any she had ever catalogued. Instead of marking stars alone, the chart depicted ancient temples connected by delicate silver lines that converged at a single location beyond the western forest. The final destination had been scratched away by someone long ago, but one detail remained untouched. A small inscription beneath the faded illustration read, "Only the forgotten may find what history chooses to hide." Emily quietly copied the remaining symbols into her notebook before carefully returning everything exactly as she had found it. Meanwhile, Ethan departed the palace with only two trusted companions, choosing secrecy over ceremony. He wanted answers before rumors transformed uncertainty into fear. As they traveled toward the western frontier, they encountered abandoned shrines where weathered wolf statues stood facing the same distant ridge. None showed signs of recent visitors, yet fresh silver flowers had begun blooming around their foundations despite the rocky soil. Ethan knelt beside one blossom and noticed its petals reflected the sunlight with an unusual pale glow. An elderly shepherd watching from nearby approached cautiously before speaking. He explained that the flowers had not appeared in generations and that his grandparents once believed they marked the road to a sanctuary protected by the moon itself. Before Ethan could ask another question, the old man simply smiled, wished the king safe travels, and quietly continued guiding his flock across the hills. By late afternoon, Emily reached the western edge of the palace gardens after following the mysterious map hidden within the parchment. The silver symbol pulsed more strongly than ever before, almost like a living heartbeat guiding each step. Beyond an ivy-covered stone wall, she noticed a narrow path that did not appear on any official map of the kingdom. The trail disappeared beneath towering ancient trees whose branches filtered the fading sunlight into countless beams of silver and gold. At nearly the same moment, Ethan arrived at the opposite end of the same forgotten forest. His horse suddenly refused to move forward, calmly lowering its head instead of showing fear. Ethan continued on foot, sensing that the silence surrounding the woods felt deliberate rather than empty. Neither he nor Emily realized they had entered the same hidden forest from opposite directions. As evening approached, a gentle breeze carried the distant sound of flowing water through the trees. Then, almost simultaneously, both stopped in their tracks. Standing between the ancient oaks was an enormous stone archway covered with glowing lunar carvings that had remained hidden from the world for centuries. As the first stars appeared above the forest, the carvings slowly awakened one after another, illuminating a path that had not welcomed a visitor in 1,000 years. The glowing archway stood in complete silence, its ancient carvings shimmering like living starlight beneath the rising moon. Emily Carter remained frozen for a long moment, unable to decide whether she had discovered history or stepped into a forgotten dream. Every symbol etched into the weathered stone seemed strangely familiar, matching the silver markings that had appeared on the mysterious parchment hidden inside her satchel. As she cautiously approached, the crescent pendant resting against her chest grew warm, releasing a gentle pulse that echoed softly through the quiet forest. One by one, the carvings brightened until a narrow passage beyond the arch revealed itself, lined with towering trees whose silver leaves reflected the moonlight like thousands of tiny mirrors. Across the forest, King Alpha Ethan Walker noticed the same glow rising between the ancient trunks. He dismissed his guards with a quiet nod, believing whatever waited ahead required silence instead of ceremony. Following the faint trail of silver light, he soon arrived at the opposite side of the archway just as Emily stepped through the hidden entrance. Neither had expected to find another traveler in a place erased from every map. They paused several feet apart, surprised yet strangely calm, as though the forgotten path itself had anticipated their meeting. Ethan lowered his lantern and offered a respectful greeting rather than demanding answers. Emily hesitated before showing him the mysterious parchment. As soon as the map caught the moonlight, its faded lines expanded across the page, revealing a winding route leading deeper into the forest. Ethan unfolded the ancient chart he had carried from the royal archives, and to their astonishment, the missing sections on his map completed the path shown on Emily's parchment. Together, the two fragments formed a single complete route that neither document could reveal alone. Realizing coincidence could no longer explain the events surrounding them, they decided to continue together. The forest gradually transformed into a landscape untouched by time. Crystal streams flowed silently beneath graceful stone bridges, luminous flowers bloomed beside moss-covered statues of wolves, and towering cedar trees formed a natural corridor guiding every step forward. The deeper they traveled, the quieter the world became until even the wind seemed to pause in anticipation. At last the trees opened into a broad valley where an enormous temple emerged from the shadows of the mountains. Unlike the ruined shrines scattered across the kingdom, this sanctuary remained perfectly preserved, its marble walls glowing beneath the moon as though centuries had passed without leaving a single mark. Massive pillars carved with celestial wolves surrounded a pair of towering silver doors engraved with countless lunar symbols. Emily gazed upward in silent wonder, while Ethan instinctively removed his gloves, resting one hand against the cool stone. At that exact moment, the crescent pendant around Emily's neck and the ancient royal signet ring worn by Ethan emitted matching silver light. The symbols across the temple doors awakened simultaneously, forming intricate patterns that slowly spread from edge to edge. A deep, Resonant sound echoed through the valley as mechanisms untouched for 1,000 years stirred back to life. Dust drifted gently from the ancient hinges, and the immense doors began opening by themselves, revealing only brilliant silver light beyond the threshold. While somewhere inside the sanctuary a calm, unseen voice quietly whispered, "Those who arrive together may finally remember what the kingdom forgot." The radiant silver light beyond the ancient doors slowly softened until Emily Carter and King Alpha Ethan Walker could finally see the sanctuary hidden within the heart of the mountain. Instead of a forgotten ruin, they found a magnificent circular hall untouched by time. 12 towering pillars surrounded the chamber, each carved with elegant wolves gazing toward a crystal dome where the full moon shone as though the mountain itself had become transparent. The air carried the quiet fragrance of cedar and wildflowers, while tiny streams of silver light flowed across the polished marble floor like gentle rivers following invisible paths. Emily stepped forward almost instinctively, feeling an overwhelming sense of familiarity she could not explain. Every heartbeat seemed to echo through the chamber, and with each step the glowing pendant around her neck pulsed in perfect rhythm with the sanctuary itself. Ethan remained beside her, observing every detail with calm caution rather than suspicion. He noticed that no dust covered the marble, no vines climbed the ancient walls, and no signs of decay had touched the sacred place despite the passing of countless centuries. It was as if time had patiently waited for this very moment. At the center of the hall stood an enormous stone pedestal supporting a perfectly smooth crystal sphere that reflected neither Emily nor Ethan, but instead displayed shifting visions of the Moon Kingdom throughout its long history. They watched cities rise, forests flourish, kings and queens come and go, and generations of ordinary people living peaceful lives beneath the same silver moon. Then the vision slowed until only one image remained. A solitary guardian stood before the sanctuary, placing one hand upon the crystal before quietly disappearing into the light. No explanation followed, only silence filled with quiet expectation. Emily cautiously reached toward the sphere, hesitating only for a moment before allowing her fingertips to rest against its cool surface. Instantly, gentle waves of silver light spread outward across the chamber. Symbols hidden within every pillar awakened together, illuminating ancient inscriptions that neither traveler had noticed before. Ethan stepped closer as graceful lines of light connected each pillar to the crystal sphere, forming the outline of a magnificent moon crest suspended above them. A calm voice echoed through the sanctuary, neither male nor female, carrying the warmth of a memory preserved across generations. Power is never entrusted to those who seek it. The moon remembers hearts that remain faithful when no reward is promised. Emily slowly lowered her hand, feeling neither fear nor triumph, only a profound sense of responsibility. Ethan met her eyes with quiet understanding. He had spent years searching for forgotten answers, yet standing within the sanctuary made him realize that leadership had never been about claiming ancient power. It had always been about protecting hope until the right moment arrived. As the final words faded into silence, a narrow corridor at the far side of the chamber gradually emerged from the shadows, illuminated by soft moonlight spilling through an opening that had not existed moments before. Beyond the passage, a gentle breeze carried the distant sound of flowing water and the faint outline of another hidden hall waiting to be explored. Without speaking, Emily and Ethan exchanged a determined glance before taking their first steps together toward the deeper mystery, unaware that someone else had quietly entered the sanctuary behind them, watching from the darkness with patient eyes that reflected the same ancient silver light. Emily Carter and King Alpha Ethan Walker advanced cautiously through the newly revealed corridor, their footsteps echoing softly across polished stone untouched for centuries. The hidden passage curved gently beneath the mountain, illuminated by pale streams of moonlight filtering through narrow openings high above. Strange crystalline veins ran across the walls, glowing with a quiet silver pulse that seemed almost alive. Neither spoke. The sanctuary itself felt as though it were listening, measuring every thought and every intention. As they descended farther, the air became cooler, carrying the faint scent of rain despite the clear night outside. Soon the corridor opened into a vast underground chamber unlike anything either of them had imagined. Before them stretched an enormous circular lake as smooth as glass, reflecting the moon shining through a natural opening in the mountain ceiling. In the exact center of the lake stood a solitary stone platform connected to the shore by a narrow bridge carved from white marble. Resting upon the platform was an ancient throne, simple in appearance, yet surrounded by countless glowing symbols drifting slowly through the air like silent stars. Emily felt an irresistible pull toward the bridge, but before she could take another step, a calm voice emerged from the darkness behind them. "You have come farther than anyone in 1,000 years." Both turned immediately. Standing at the edge of the chamber was an elderly man dressed in a weathered gray cloak. His silver hair reached his shoulders, and his face carried deep lines shaped not by bitterness, but by countless years of quiet patience. He held no weapon. His hands rested calmly upon a wooden staff carved with the same crescent symbols that covered the sanctuary walls. Most remarkable of all were his eyes. They reflected the moonlight with the same gentle silver glow that illuminated the ancient temple itself. Ethan instinctively stepped slightly in front of Emily, not out of distrust, but out of duty. "Who are you?" he asked respectfully. The old man smiled, though sadness lingered behind the expression. "For many generations," he replied softly, "people called me many names. Keeper, hermit, ghost. In truth, none of those names matter anymore." Emily studied him carefully. There was something strangely familiar about his voice, as though she had heard it somewhere beyond memory. The mysterious whisper that had welcomed them into the sanctuary carried the same calm warmth. The old man slowly walked toward the lake, every glowing symbol around the chamber brightening with each step he took. Yet he made no effort to sit upon the ancient throne. Instead, he stopped several feet away, gazing quietly at its empty seat. "I was never meant to rule," he said. "Nor was the guardian." Emily exchanged a puzzled glance with Ethan. "The guardian?" she asked. The old man nodded. "The kingdom has spent centuries searching for a warrior powerful enough to save it." He looked toward the shimmering lake. "They searched for strength." Then he turned back toward them. But the moon was never searching for strength. It was searching for those who would choose compassion before power. His words settled over the chamber like falling snow. At that very moment, the crystal lake suddenly rippled, although no wind stirred the air. One by one, luminous images emerged above its surface. Emily watched ancient kings kneel beside ordinary farmers. Queens embraced orphan children. Warriors lowered their swords to spare defeated enemies. None of the visions celebrated conquest. Every memory honored sacrifice, mercy, and unwavering kindness. Ethan felt an unexpected weight settle upon his heart. Throughout his reign, he had believed protecting the kingdom depended upon military strength and political wisdom. Yet every lesson preserved within the sanctuary revealed a deeper truth. The Moon Kingdom had flourished whenever its leaders chose compassion over fear. Without warning, a violent tremor shook the chamber. Dust drifted from the ceiling as the peaceful lake erupted with expanding waves. The glowing symbols circling the throne flickered erratically, their steady rhythm broken for the first time since Emily and Ethan had entered the sanctuary. Far above, beyond the mountain, distant horns echoed through the night. The old man's peaceful expression hardened. "They have found this place." Another tremor rolled beneath the floor. "The council has arrived." From the entrance corridor came the unmistakable sound of armored footsteps growing steadily louder. Emily instinctively gripped the mysterious parchment hidden inside her cloak. Ethan rested one hand upon the hilt of his sword, though the old man quietly raised his staff before either of them could move. "No," he said calmly. "If blood is spilled inside this sanctuary." He looked toward the ancient throne as every symbol around it dimmed. "The moon will fall silent once more." The chamber became still. Only the approaching footsteps echoed through the darkness, drawing ever closer, while the elderly stranger watched the entrance with quiet resolve, as though he had been waiting for this moment for an entire lifetime. The first armored soldiers emerged from the corridor just as the sanctuary fell into complete silence. Their polished silver armor reflected the moonlight spilling across the crystal lake, while the banner of the royal council hung from their spears. At their center walked High Chancellor Victor Ashford, the kingdom's most influential advisor. His expression remained composed, but his sharp eyes immediately swept across the chamber, lingering on Emily Carter, King Alpha Ethan Walker, the ancient throne, and finally the elderly guardian standing quietly beside the lake. So, Victor said with a faint smile, the legends were true after all. His calm voice echoed through the sanctuary. For centuries we searched for this place. He slowly stepped onto the marble bridge despite the old man's warning. And now, history finally belongs to us. Ethan moved forward. It belongs to no one. Victor stopped only a few steps away. Your Majesty. His tone remained respectful, yet every word carried quiet defiance. The kingdom is changing. He glanced toward the glowing throne. Our enemies grow stronger every season. The old ways are no longer enough. Emily noticed that none of the Chancellor's soldiers seemed interested in the beauty surrounding them. Their attention remained fixed entirely upon the throne at the center of the lake, as though it were a prize waiting to be claimed. The elderly guardian planted his wooden staff gently against the marble floor. The sanctuary does not recognize ambition. Victor smiled. Perhaps. But kingdoms are not protected by stories. He slowly removed an ancient metal cylinder from beneath his cloak. Its surface was engraved with symbols almost identical to those covering the sanctuary walls. Emily's heart skipped a beat. The missing archive, she whispered. Victor looked toward her. You recognized it. He nodded with quiet satisfaction. My family preserved what others believed was lost. For generations we waited. Not for the guardian. His eyes settled upon the throne. But for the gate to open. Before anyone could react, Victor pressed the cylinder into a circular socket hidden beside the bridge. A deep metallic sound echoed beneath the chamber. The crystal lake suddenly darkened. Silver light flowing through the sanctuary flickered violently before turning pale blue. Cracks of shadow spread across the marble floor like frozen lightning, racing toward the ancient throne. No, the old guardian shouted. For the first time, fear crossed his face. The seal was never meant to be opened that way. The entire mountain trembled. Above them, fragments of crystal rained gently from the ceiling as the peaceful chamber transformed. The glowing symbols surrounding the throne shattered one after another, dissolving into streams of scattered light. Emily instinctively reached for the mysterious parchment. As her fingers touched it, the map burst into brilliant silver radiance. The light expanded around her, pushing back the growing darkness surrounding the bridge. Victor stared in disbelief. So, he whispered, it chose you. Emily looked down as the parchment slowly dissolved into countless glowing particles. Instead of disappearing, every fragment circled around her wrist, forming an elegant silver mark shaped like a crescent moon. At the same instant, Ethan's royal signet ring blazed with matching light. The ancient throne responded. Its weathered stone surface awakened completely, revealing intricate carvings of celestial wolves running beneath the moon. The old guardian closed his eyes in relief. The covenant, he murmured. It still lives. Victor's calm expression finally cracked. No, he stepped forward. This power was meant to restore the council. It cannot choose an archive servant. He raised his hand. Several soldiers advanced toward Emily. Before they could cross the bridge, every wolf statue surrounding the chamber suddenly opened its glowing silver eyes. A thunderous howl echoed through the sanctuary. The marble floor trembled violently. One after another, the colossal stone wolves stepped down from their pedestals. Not as monsters, not as spirits, but as silent ancient guardians answering a command unheard for 1,000 years. The soldiers froze. Even Victor instinctively took one step backward. The largest wolf slowly lowered its enormous head before Emily. Not in attack, in respect. The entire sanctuary became perfectly still. Then, from somewhere far beyond the mountain, a second, deeper howl rolled across the night. The elderly guardian looked toward the distant sound, his face suddenly filled with both hope and sorrow. The last guardian, he whispered, has finally awakened. The ancient wolves remained perfectly still, their silver eyes fixed upon Emily Carter. One by one, the colossal guardians lowered their heads, acknowledging her with a reverence no king or queen had received in living memory. The crystal lake calmed, its darkened waters slowly regaining their silver glow, while thousands of luminous symbols drifted gently through the sanctuary like falling stars. No one spoke. Even the royal council soldiers, moments earlier ready to seize the throne, stood frozen before a sight that defied every legend they had ever dismissed as myth. High Chancellor Victor Ashford refused to accept what stood before him. "This is impossible," he muttered, his voice trembling with frustration rather than fear. The Guardian was supposed to be a warrior. He looked directly at Emily. "Not an Omega." His words echoed sharply across the chamber. For a brief moment, Emily lowered her eyes. She remembered every whisper she had endured inside the palace, every noble who had ignored her presence, every servant who believed she would remain invisible forever. Those memories still lingered within her. Then she slowly lifted her head again. Before she could answer, the elderly Guardian quietly stepped beside her. "You continue to measure worth by rank." His calm voice filled the sanctuary. "The moon never has." Victor clenched his fists. "The kingdom needs strength." The old man gently shook his head. "No, it needs someone who remembers why strength exists." Silence followed. King Alpha Ethan Walker stepped forward until he stood beside Emily rather than in front of her. His voice was steady. "I have ruled this kingdom for years. I believed courage meant standing above others." He glanced toward Emily. "But every step that brought us here began because one forgotten servant chose kindness when no one was watching." Emily looked at him, surprised. Ethan smiled faintly. "You preserved history. You searched for truth. You never sought power. The sanctuary chose exactly as it was meant to." The ancient wolves responded with another deep, harmonious howl that resonated through the mountain. At the center of the lake, the crystal throne awakened completely. Its weathered surface transformed into brilliant white stone veined with flowing silver light. Above it appeared a magnificent celestial wolf formed entirely from moonlight. It towered over the sanctuary, neither solid nor transparent, its luminous eyes carrying immeasurable wisdom. Every person present instinctively bowed their head, not because they were commanded, because the presence itself inspired quiet reverence. The great celestial wolf lowered its gaze toward Emily and Ethan. A gentle voice echoed directly within their hearts. "The Guardian was never one soul. The covenant has always required two." Images surrounded them. They saw an ancient king standing beside an ordinary healer, a warrior protecting a scholar, a ruler walking beside one who carried compassion instead of authority. Generation after generation. Always two. The vision slowly faded. Understanding settled over Ethan. "The throne," he whispered. "It was never meant for one ruler." The elderly Guardian smiled for the first time. "Power alone always fails. But wisdom without courage cannot protect." The moon chose balance. Emily felt the silver mark upon her wrist begin to glow warmly. Ethan's royal signet answered with matching light. Thin strands of silver energy connected them, not as chains, but as symbols of shared purpose. Victor stared at the bond in disbelief. Everything his family had pursued for generations had unfolded before him, yet none of it belonged to ambition. It belonged to trust. His shoulders slowly lowered. The determination that had driven him for decades quietly disappeared. "I misunderstood everything," he admitted softly. The old Guardian approached him. "You sought to save the kingdom." Victor nodded. "I simply forgot what the kingdom truly needed." For several moments no one moved. Then the sanctuary itself began to change. The towering pillars released brilliant beams of moonlight toward the ceiling. Ancient cracks sealed themselves. Broken carvings became whole. The lifeless statues throughout the chamber regained their quiet radiance. Far beyond the mountain, every forgotten shrine across the moon kingdom awakened simultaneously. Silver flames illuminated abandoned temples. Weathered bells rang through distant forests. Stone wolves lifted their heads beneath the night sky. Across villages and cities alike, people looked upward in astonishment as the full moon shone brighter than anyone had witnessed in 1,000 years. Inside the sanctuary, the elderly Guardian quietly removed the weathered cloak from his shoulders. Beneath it rested ceremonial robes bearing the ancient crest of the Moon Kingdom. He looked toward Emily and Ethan with peaceful eyes. "My task is finished." He turned toward the crystal throne. "It is time for the last Guardian." He paused, smiling gently, to reveal himself. The sanctuary stood in absolute silence. The ancient Guardian slowly ascended the white marble steps leading toward the crystal throne, every movement calm, deliberate, as though he had rehearsed this final journey for an entire lifetime. Moonlight poured through the opening above the mountain, surrounding him in a gentle silver glow while the celestial wolf watched without moving. Emily Carter and King Alpha Ethan Walker remained side by side. Neither tried to stop him. Some endings were never meant to be interrupted. The old man reached the throne and rested one weathered hand upon its smooth surface. For a brief moment, the sanctuary seemed to breathe. Every pillar brightened. Every ancient wolf lowered its head. Every silver symbol suspended in the air began orbiting slowly around the throne like stars circling a quiet moon. The guardian smiled peacefully. "When I was young," he began, "I believed my duty was to protect this sanctuary." His voice echoed softly across the chamber. "But I was wrong. My duty was simply to wait." He turned toward Emily. For someone who never believed herself important. Then toward Ethan. And for a king willing to walk beside another instead of above them. A warm breeze drifted through the sanctuary. The old man's silver eyes reflected countless memories. "I have carried the title of guardian for longer than history remembers. But the guardian was never meant to live forever." He gently closed his eyes. The kingdom no longer needs someone to guard the past. It needs people brave enough to build the future. As the final words left his lips, the crystal throne released an immense wave of silver light. The ancient robes upon his shoulders dissolved into thousands of glowing particles. His wooden staff blossomed into a living branch covered with tiny moon-white flowers before quietly fading into light. There was no sorrow, no pain, only peace. The old guardian smiled one last time. Then his entire figure became countless shimmering lights that floated upward toward the crystal dome before disappearing into the night sky. The sanctuary remained silent. Moments later, the celestial wolf slowly approached Emily and Ethan. It lowered its enormous head between them. Its radiant form separated into two gentle streams of silver light. One entered the crescent mark upon Emily's wrist. The other flowed into Ethan's royal signet. Immediately, the sanctuary transformed. The ancient throne no longer appeared as a seat of power. Instead, it became a monument, a reminder, a symbol that leadership was never something one possessed. It was something shared. Outside the mountain, dawn finally arrived. Golden sunlight spread across the Moon Kingdom for the first time after the longest night anyone could remember. Throughout villages, forests, and distant cities, forgotten temples awakened beneath the morning sky. Broken fountains flowed again. Ancient bells rang without human hands. Fields that had lain barren for years began blooming with silver flowers. Children laughed as glowing butterflies filled the air. Old storytellers looked toward the western mountains with tears in their eyes. The legends had never been myths. They had simply been waiting. Days later, Emily returned to the royal archives. She wore no crown, no royal robes. She quietly restored damaged manuscripts exactly as she always had. Only now, scholars from every corner of the kingdom filled the halls, preserving forgotten history instead of hiding it. Beside the entrance hung a new inscription. "The future is safest in the hands of those who remember the past." Ethan often visited the archives without ceremony. Sometimes they worked together in comfortable silence. Sometimes they walked through the palace gardens, discussing the kingdom's future. The bond between them needed no grand declaration. Trust had become stronger than destiny itself. Far beyond the palace, hidden deep within the western mountains, the ancient sanctuary remained open. Travelers who entered with humble hearts found peace. Those who came seeking only power found nothing more than quiet stone and empty halls. The Moon Kingdom flourished once again, not because an immortal guardian had returned, but because ordinary people chose compassion over pride, truth over ambition, and hope over fear. And on clear nights, when the full moon rose above the silver forests, villagers sometimes claimed they could see the outline of a great celestial wolf watching over the kingdom from the stars. No one feared the sight. They simply smiled, because they remembered the lesson history had nearly erased. True guardians are not chosen for their strength. They are remembered for their kindness.